Good afternoon. This is Virginia Kerr. I'm Head of Communications and Development here at Center for Research Libraries. We will be starting the webinar soon. I'd like to welcome all registrants this afternoon, including we have guests from the Scholars Trust, as well as CRL member institutions, including some recent new members and a number of our longstanding members. I want to just go over housekeeping details, primarily that your phones are muted upon entry. We do this just to avoid background noise during the presentations. We do really welcome your comments and questions, and you can submit those at any time using the chat button that you'll see on your screen. This afternoon's program is divided into 3 segments, and we have reserved time at the end of each 30-minute segment for the comments and questions related to that segment. So please do let us know. Just go ahead and enter your comments and questions. At this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to CRL's President, Greg Yao.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining the Center for Research Libraries webinar this afternoon. I'm Greg Yao, and as of last month, I'm the new president of the Center for Research Libraries. So this is the first time I've had the pleasure of introducing one of CRL's webinars. For those of you who might be new to the Center for Research Libraries, the Center for Research Libraries is based on a really simple premise, but that's very powerful and impactful in practice. And the premise behind CRL is that research libraries can come together and undertake collective action to address and make progress in addressing shared challenges. And in so doing, research libraries can come together and project the first principles and values of research libraries into the emerging scholarly communications environment. Another important thing to remember with CRL is that we have an emphatic commitment to maintaining a global perspective, and we're committed to collectively collecting, stewarding, and celebrating global collections and preserving at-risk voices that might be at risk of being unpreserved or marginalized or otherwise at risk, really centering a diverse set of voices. So those commitments and that premise behind CRL is a platform for collective action, will be coming through the rest of the webinar. The first presenter will be Amy Wood, CRL's Head of Technical Services. Amy will talk about some work in data analytics and data management that her team has been undertaking, all of which is intended to be able to empower shared print initiatives. And in this instance, Amy will be talking about shared print initiatives and partnerships with the Scholars Trust. After Amy, the Center for Research Libraries Vice President for Collections and Services, James Simon, will be talking about a number of global digital initiatives that CRL has been advancing over the last couple of months. And so with that, I'll conclude my remarks. Thank you all for being here again this afternoon. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amy. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is Amy. Thanks very much for joining us. And I want to start by thanking my colleagues at the Scholars Trust Libraries for letting me highlight our partnership in this collection comparison project. The project is not complete, it's still ongoing. We're close to the end, but not quite complete. So the data has not yet been finalized. So the information about records and numbers in this presentation are meant to highlight issues of interest surfaced in the project and not to be considered final. So why do a collection analysis? I think the simple answer is to improve our collection intelligence. Much of our conversation about the North American effort to ensure permanent access to essential serials has been about the lack of combined strategy or collaborative strategy. Developing an effective collaborative strategy depends on collection intelligence. And CRL's data services address 3 important threads of information that help create this collection intelligence. The first thread is providing information about what individual libraries have in their collections and across their programs. So we're always talking about silos of information and silos of collections, and really we want to bring those together by knowing what we have in them. The second thread is how your individual collections fit into the larger North American shared print strategy. And as a collective, even though we are working together to improve services and collections for all, we always have our own collections interest at heart. And so we always begin with wondering what is in them, and then how does our collection fit in. So the view is a little bit big on our side, but does need to take in the full national or North American effort. The third, and perhaps the scariest for people, I think, is detailed information about problems in the local records. This is really important information that CRL unearths, I think, during these collection comparisons, and we always try to share this information in the most useful way possible, so that the libraries or the librarians partnering with us on these projects can make use of this collection to improve their records, because there are many ways that either lack of information or incorrect information really prevents the records from being considered in a collection comparison, or even with resource sharing. Without that OCLC number or without a correct OCLC number, it's easy to overlook some really valuable information. And the Scholars Trust libraries have been particularly receptive about reviewing information that we provide about problems in their records. The Scholars Trust libraries provide the paper database with updates on retention commitments 4 times a year. And with each one of those updates, we provide information back on ways we think the records can be improved. And every subsequent update that we have, we always see improvements in either the holdings themselves, or just a holdings description, or just records that couldn't go in the first time are now eligible for inclusion in paper. So in addition to supporting Scholars Trust goals for the current collection analysis, CRL is taking the opportunity in this analysis, in this project, to test and develop the tools, the workflow, processes, and staffing needed to undertake these projects. This is a really important part of this project, because we feel strongly that to do this work at scale, we need to develop significant strategic goals together, that the CRL team cannot be the only ones that have access to these tools or have a full understanding of what is involved in these projects. We need to recommend processes that other libraries or programs can undertake themselves. So first, a little background about the Scholars Trust. The Scholars Trust is a collaboration among the libraries of the Association of Southeastern Research Libraries, the Washington Research Library Consortium, and the Florida Academic Repository, and the Triangle Research Libraries Network. They combine the contents of their print journal archives under a single retention and access agreement. The Scholars Trust has over 40,000 records in paper, representing over 31,600 committed journal titles. Scholars Trust puts a great deal of effort into ensuring it meets the goals of the correct number of complete copies held. So they provide CRL with an update. I already mentioned they update paper 4 times a year and are always filling in gaps in the collection. The collection comparison project has some basic steps which are outlined on this slide. Everything begins with a conversation about goals, timeline, and cost. And all correspondence is usually undertaken between the program managers and CRL. And certainly in this case, the program manager at Scholars Trust took the lead in this. And the second step is for the libraries. Scholars Trust provided all libraries with a questionnaire asking for key information, such as which field in their records holds the OCLC number, the BIB record number, holdings record number, location, and then the actual holdings. These are not standardized across ILS systems, as most of you probably know, and we simply cannot apply a generic rule to pull this important data from different record sets. So I think one lesson learned in this process, and that is, as I said, one of our goals in here is to really tease out ways that we can improve this, is the questionnaire provided by Scholars Trust was really valuable, but it would have saved us a lot of time. I think if CRL had just sat down with the Scholars Trust program manager and reviewed all of the questionnaires, the answers in the beginning. We found what we did was we went through each library's holdings one by one, using the questionnaire, the responses in the questionnaire as a guide, and it really would have been helpful if we had just sat down because we realized that some of the survey responders did not completely understand the information that they needed to provide, particularly with location codes that we needed to exclude. So as I showed on the last slide, that the data integration, it really is about 80% of the effort in the process. And so on this slide, I've outlined the different steps in the data integration. We started with, of course, the full corpus of records, which totaled about 1 million records, and included collections that were as just over 1,000 records to those that were exceeded 95,000. So it was quite a range, but most of them were sort of clustered in the 10,000 to 50,000 range for 35 record sets. And these 35 record sets represented 33 individual libraries, with a couple of the libraries providing more than one record set for different OCLC symbols. So the data integration is where, as I said, where most of the effort is for CRL or anyone doing this work, pulling the data from the records, doing enough cleanup that the data can be further manipulated, checking the data and manipulating the data. And one very big lesson we learned in a previous collection comparison we did with for the East libraries was that incorrect information at the outset causes very real trouble downstream. So in this project, we made a big effort to create processes of pulling the data and checking the data that were systematic and could be repeated and checked in multiple ways. And one example of this is that we found after aggregating all of the records and deduping them, that there were a large number of titles that were held by only one participating library. This is something that we have seen in other collection comparison or analysis projects that we've done, that it just is, it's sort of an outsized percentage of the or more than we expected a percentage of the collection is held only by one library. But still, we were concerned that that large number may be hiding or masking true overlap. So with this, in this project, unlike other ones in the past, we performed 3 different checks on the data for that large collection of single holding libraries. So after doing just a basic OCLC match, we also did a title match to in an automated way with a script that we have. We did an ISSN search across the entire corpus, And we looked at the WorldCat holdings to see if we could identify additional holdings that were not represented in the local collection. It's not unusual for libraries to attach their holding symbol in WorldCat, and for one reason or other, records don't get into the local system. So we wanted to tease those out, and I would say each one of those checks highlighted some things that we needed to further check, but all of those checks, I think, underscored that that number really was accurate, that there really was a large proportion of unique titles, unique across these participating libraries. For Scholars Trust and other collection comparisons, CRL provides large spreadsheets of data for use in whatever database or visualization tool the program managers have. And since part of our goals for this project was to improve our process, we used analytics to question our resulting data. As in the example that I gave before, you can see the chart on the top left shows that really outsized portion or percentage where only one copy is held across the library collections, and that is the local library collections, not the WorldCat holdings. I also added to this presentation a few visualizations of the type that I thought would be of interest to Scholars Trust. And in the data that we provide, they'll be looking for holdings where 7 or more of the participating libraries hold titles in common. So I thought it would look more closely at those titles. And in that group of just under 30,000 titles, 8,000 do not have retention commitments registered in paper and may not be part of another shared print program. So that would be a real boost to the national shared print effort to have those commitments on those 8,000s. Overlap between Scholars Trust and Rosemont libraries is also an important data point. Scholars Trust is interested in ensuring that 3 copies of a title are held by Rosemont libraries. This helps with decision about whether or not they should retain a copy locally or if they should fill in gaps for other holdings. And for those who aren't familiar, Rosemont is the Rosemont Shared Print Alliance, a collaboration of regional programs interested in coordinating their efforts on a larger scale. And this includes, in addition to Scholars Trust, the Big Ten Academic Alliance, Eastern Academic Scholars Trust, and Florida Academic Libraries Repository, and the Western Regional Storage Trust. So I've added one more analytic to show how decisions about data can make a significant impact in the results. The chart on the top was an overview of the full corpus of the Scholars Trust records used in the collection comparison using the available LC class information. And the chart below was limited to the records in scope for the collection, which primarily excluded government documents that had been included in the larger set. In the top chart, I gave preference to the LC class that was in the WorldCat record, and in the bottom chart, I gave preference to the LC class that was in the local library record. And you can see there's a significant difference in how the titles kind of fall out along the distribution. One thing that was highlighted in preferring the local LC class was that often there were as many as 4 different LC classes assigned to the same title. And that was one reason why in the past, and one reason why paper itself prefers the WorldCat LC class. But I think this analytic underscores that this is really, I think, this decision to which LC class to use, how many to use, and is really something that I think we need to work with the community to understand. It's I think, not something that in a collection comparison we would want to make the decision about. I think it's something that we would want to solicit information from our partners and simply apply in any way we can. So I'll just wrap up by saying that I started the presentation emphasizing that collection intelligence is crucial to a collaborative, strategic, shared print effort. But I want to end by saying that our collective intelligence is just as crucial. So CRL's partnership with the shared print community on projects like the Scholars Trust Collection Comparison are invaluable to improving our understanding of what libraries have, the obstacles they face, and they help us provide insight into ways we can challenge these obstacles collaboratively. So thank you very much for your attention, and I think we'll open it up to questions now. So I'll look to see if we have any. I think one question that we have, I think, is what tools is CRL using? I think we're often talking about all the Excel spreadsheets that we use or the Access database, and one of the tools that one of my colleagues here at CRL created recently that has been really invaluable in this project is something that helps us use the OCLC APIs. So someone who may not have the tech background to do the scripting to do it has a little user interface to pull the records, and then another part of that actually pulls out very, very specific data or fields from the record so that they can be further manipulated. And then there are other features in that tool that can pull out the years from holdings and add them up. So this was really invaluable. I think one of the things we tried to do was to see how much of this work could be done by someone with very little scripting ability, and we did find I think weaknesses in the tool that we use, and ways that we could improve it. Certainly not ready for prime time or to be shared outside of CRL, but I think it was a real start in helping us build a tool that we can share with the community. One comment from Scholars Trust that I wanted to add was that the questionnaire that they distributed among their libraries was based on questionnaire that East had used in its collection comparison, and information about that collection comparison that perhaps may not have been in the questionnaire, but kind of went into an idea of best practices or best standards. So we definitely have to give a shout out to East for help with that questionnaire. And we just got a comment in the box that also gave a sort of shout out to West as well. So it says, thankful to our colleagues from East and West for so openly sharing their collection analysis documentation. Hugely helpful. That's from the program manager at Scholars Trust. I think that's it for our questions today, so please feel free to contact me if you have further questions or just are curious about the collection comparisons and maybe considering one for your own library or projects. Thanks very much, and I will turn it over to James Simon.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, everyone, for your thoughtful comments and questions on that last presentation. I did want to mention, however, that on CRL's website, a recent news item was just posted regarding the Print Archives Preservation Registry. Amy and her team in technical services have been, alongside our systems staff, have been working alongside the community to discuss use cases and improvements to the paper database. And recently we released a series of enhancements to the user interface as well as to some of the underlying infrastructure that will really allow paper to grow in response to the growing needs that the community has expressed. In particular, the ability to incorporate not just registered information on print holdings, but also increased capacity to share information about where titles may have been digitized and held by trustworthy repositories. We've also better clustered holdings results together so you can see those different formats. And we've also combined ways that programs and institutions may register their holdings in multiple repositories or multiple agreements. We've shown those within the system itself. So I do recommend you take a look at that news item on our site, as well as some of those enhancements to paper.